Welcome to the Speak with People podcast. My name is Jason Raitz. I'll be your host, and this podcast exists to help you improve your communication skills. Whether you communicate one-on-one, to a team, from a stage, or from behind a screen, we know that when we improve our communication skills as leaders, it exponentially changes everything. It improves our relationships, it improves our leadership skills, and it improves our business skills. So let's get ready to dive into this next episode. Can't wait to talk because it is something that I've been doing for a long time in my life. And I'm at a pivotal part in my life where I'm just trying to learn everything I can from seasoned entrepreneurs, speakers, leaders, business owners. And I'm just beyond humbled to have the guests that we do today. So those of you who are listening, who've always wanted to be a successful speaker, you've wanted to be a professional speaker, you've wanted to leave your day job and be a speaker, or maybe you want to plan live events and you want to host these type of transformative, life-changing events for different leaders. This is your episode. We're going to talk about how you can move from, just kind of your passion area to making a living. And so I just can't wait to interview our guest. I'm honored to interview Terry Weaver. He's the author and podcast host of Making Elephants Fly. He's had amazing guests on his podcast, including Seth Godin and John Acuff and Jesse Cole, to name a few. I mean, all of those are like, holy cow, they're just incredible. And here's what I love the most about him. He's incredibly generous. He invited me to be a part of his Think conference last month in Orlando, and I walked away with buckets and buckets of learnings and notes, and I've just been so excited to get to know him. Terry, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Welcome.
Well, man, it's good to be here. We can definitely talk about live events and how to make pennies and pennies. Definitely don't go and start live events because you want to get rich. And I would say that about speaking too, man. It's interesting that you kind of set us up that way, because I was talking to one of our other speakers from the thing. Cabrina, Ashley, and I have been working on a kind of a project together, and she's definitely someone you should have on the show. We were sitting having lunch at my favorite local Chinese restaurant because they have a $10 lunch special. And because why would you not go somewhere in 2023 that has a good $10 lunch special, right?
Right.
Because those aren't the McDonald's. I don't think you can even get out of there for that anymore. And we were there, and we were looking around the restaurant, and we were thinking about, if you were to go and start a restaurant, how much money you would have to invest to start a restaurant. The tables, the chairs, the business, the stocking of the kitchen, in their case, the stocking of the bar, the graphic design company that you'd have to hire to build a website and to build an online ordering, and have to integrate your business with all of the delivery apps and all of these things, right? And yet so many people get into this space that you and I kind of live in, of speaking and writing and having a knowledge-based business or an influence-based business, and they don't invest a penny, and they wonder why they fail at it. They don't invest in themselves. They don't actually do the work that it would take to start any other business. I mean, even if you were going to go be like an HVAC repairman, you'd have to go and buy a van, and you'd have to buy tools. And we think we can buy a MacBook Pro and a website with our name as the website URL, and think that's what it takes to be a speaker and be a successful business coach or consultant. And man, it goes so much deeper than that.
Absolutely. Well, hey, before we jump in, because I can't wait to jump into more of that.
Yeah, in my former life, I was a motivational speaker, but today I might just be a demotivational speaker.
No, I love it.
Just sometimes you've got to know. I wish that somebody had sat me down years ago and kind of gave me the what is this? What is it really like? What are all of the facets, and what are all the pieces, and what are the people that are teaching this, that aren't actually just trying to sell you something, but actually trying to help you learn how to be successful at this, and how to take because I do think there's a significant shift and change in your life that happens when you move from getting paid to what you no, not for what you do.
Mm,
And that's what speakers are. They're people who hop on stage and people pay them for their knowledge. They're not getting paid for their ability to be a great orator, their ability to say quotable, tweetable things, or xable things now, whatever that is, right? And you're getting paid because you have a knowledge that has the ability to impart change, to enact division. I remember one of my good friends, Chuck Basalmo, and I were talking about, and he spoke at the thing. One of my favorite humans on planet Earth.
mm,
You and him kind of also have a similar trajectory. Chuck is currently a pastor in Southern Virginia, but also kind of making shifts and changes to what he does. And he's also he's a business coach that coaches real estate agents.
mm,
And he was going to speak at a big real estate conference, and he's like, Terry, I have to decide what I'm going to charge these people, and how I go about charging them what I charge them is, I know that if I make this room full of real estate agents 1% better, that if they sell 1% more real estate in the next business year, I know how much money that is.
mm.
And so if I'm going to impart that kind of change, I'm priceless to those people, and I have to be compensated as such.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, tell us a little bit more about your story, how you've gotten to the place you're at now. What are all those moments that
Oh,
kind of led up to there?
man, it's such a journey, like I think we all like want to have like that Paul and Silas moment where like God shows up and like speaks in the clouds, and you know what you're doing. And my life has been more of a Darwin life, like it's been more of an evolution. Um because I started in the mid 90s. I went to a very conservative Christian high school. Like for those of you who have a church background, like we used to call Liberty University Liberal University. If that gives you any indication. Um, and I went to I'll spell it out, and most of your listeners of faith will know this journey as we talk about. I went to Bob Jones University as
Oh
a
yeah.
16-year-old, and I still have the Bible that they gave me when I got done preaching. I preached about the woman of the well on the stage at Bob Jones University, and I blew the doors off the building. I spoke in front of at 15, 16. I spoke in front of 3,000. They called them preacher boys. And Bob Jones III came up to me and said, "Son, this is your gospel gun. Let us help you load it." Which
Ooh.
I'm not even sure. I'm still not even sure what that means. I don't want to. We'll not unpack the theology of that on your podcast today. Uh, but so from that perspective, my journey kind of led me down. Um, I kind of decided that like the traditional path, I really didn't want to go to Bob Jones. I knew that wasn't where I needed to be, and I had an opportunity just to kind of. My mom had my little brother, and her husband had left her, and I knew I needed to be home. So we started going. I started going to community college,
Mm.
and like my first week of community college, there was a sign that said "Youth Pastor Wanted." And it was basically the qualifications was that you have a pulse. Um, and it was a whopping $100 a week, and
Yep.
I took that job. And but through that job, I went to a network of youth pastors, and started going to was led by the National Network of Youth Ministries, if you know that organization from back in the day.
Oh yeah.
I met a dude who was a brilliant leader. He had a youth group of 500 and a couple other guys, and they started to know my giftedness for communication,
Mm.
and they started to invite me to come speak at their events and their disciple nows. Um, you know, one of the questions I saw that you sent over was, when was your first gig? And I'm thinking like, man, my first gig was probably like at a disciple now at a cow farm, like in the living room speaking to students. And, and I think I got $50 for the weekend. And back in the day, that was, in 1996, that was big disciple now money. And I, that transitioned into me doing that, and I started getting on stages and doing getting paid to do people's youth camps. Leslie and I, my wife, got married in '98, and that summer things really picked up. I almost spoke. I had the opportunity to go. I was offered a position to speak for Fuge,
Oh,
for
wow.
Centrifuge that summer, and I said no. It was probably a bad decision, but there was one church that had offered to pay me more and for speaking a week at their camp because it was their budget. Because I always asked people back in the day, like, "What's your budget?" And whatever their budget
Yep.
was is normally what I went for if I didn't lose my, if it was reasonable. And I went to go speak for that church in West Palm Beach, Florida, which actually turns out to be the same church that one of my people I really look up to, a guy named John Maxwell, where he's kind of
Oh,
been on the adjunct staff at that church, and that was
yep.
the I went and did their youth camp, and started doing youth camps all over the country, and started doing that youth camp. There was a little band that was the concert band that night, and they were called Skillet. Um, we had some I think one of the worst kids that led worship was from a little church in Australia called Hillsong. And all of these weird things happened, and I ended up we ended up moving to Nashville in 2001, and working with Christian artists and working with worship leaders, and kind of because I realized as a speaker um that I needed to be able to package myself with the artists, because the artists were making all of the money. I
Mm.
would go do a youth camp and I'd be getting $1,000, and Audio Adrenaline would be getting $25,000,
Ooh,
and it was
right.
like, well, this is great, you know, and I knew that I was the one providing the transformation that they were really interested in. And that's not a cocky thing, but I knew that I was there to have kids make decisions, whatever
Mm.
those decisions were. And through that process, early on in those years, probably that first February, I did a school assembly, and it was one of the worst experiences of my life. It was a double wide gym, and they had a microphone that was in a guitar amp that just was reverb city, and there was 400 kids, you know, spread out 300 yards across two basketball gyms back to back, not side by side, but back end to end. And it was
Oof.
the worst experience of my life. I said, I'll never do that again. Fast forward to, years later, here I am, standing on stage in Lufkin, Texas, in an arena, to thousands and thousands of kids, um, doing school assemblies. And that kind of shifted my life, did school assemblies for a while. Um, and then, that kind of led me through a process where I literally left that school assembly and went to do a choir retreat, in Waco, Texas. And I knew after that weekend that I never wanted to preach to the choir anymore. And so we really tried to blow up our school assembly model. And it really just what we learned was we had one option, and that was just to go get secular fundraising. Because the
Mm.
church really wasn't interested in serving lost kids, and that's who I wanted to reach. I
Oof.
wanted to reach people far from God, and the church didn't want to put their money where their mouth was. Um, they just wanted, I realized the harsh reality that most churches weren't interested in doing what they were commissioned to do, that um, they were interested in, babysitting church kids and
Sure.
not actually. And, that's what I was really passionate about. I was tired of speaking it. Like, I did not want to do any more disciple now. So that kind of led me through a process. I met a buddy that, we were living here in Nashville, Tennessee, and I knew all these people because I saw them every day at the coffee houses we hung out. I knew Michael Hyatt, and Michael Hyatt had a book called Platform come out. He's like, "You
Oh,
know the
yeah.
platform?" I was like, "Yeah, I know Platform." He's like, "You think you could help me do that membership thing?" And we did a membership for him. It made $1 million,
Oh.
um, pretty quickly, and that kind of shifted things for me. That relationship kind of went south because that's what happens a lot of times in business when Jesus is what's for sale sometimes. And man, I'm just unpacking it all today. I'm gonna need to call my therapist after this podcast. But yeah, man, it was a season of disruption. And what I realized, kind of towards the end of that process, is what I really did is I thought I moved to Nashville to work with bands, but what I really was doing this whole time was working with brands.
Mm.
That I was building these people who had big dreams, and they had them in their garage, And that was the same thing I was doing through this membership, because I basically, you know, I didn't know what I was doing, but I basically ghost wrote all of his content for him.
Mm.
He didn't have a whole lot to say that was of any use to anybody other than some inspirational things. So we turned it into we created a curriculum, and um, you know, I had no idea the value of the service that I was providing for somebody. Um, but you learn that as you grow, right? And
Right.
so through that process, I began. We did a conference together in Southern California, and through that, we did one and it was really successful, and then we did another, and it was just we grew apart because we were both starting to ask questions about hey, this isn't working for me, this isn't working for you. um Ego is a very interesting thing to manage when you talk about the work that I do sometimes and helping people be successful. Nobody wants to admit that somebody helped them get there.
Mm.
And there's a lot of interesting, there's a lot of people who talk about, one of my least favorite phrases in business, man, is the term self-made. No one is
Mm.
self-made.
Yep.
Everyone has a village that's risen up around them that probably goes back to their childhood or their hometown of people that, for me, I look back at some key people, my youth pastor, and Alan Wilson, the first guy that I was an intern for, and Mrs. Shawn, my third grade teacher, and these people that stepped out and believed in me. And, like even like Seth Godin, who when I emailed him as some random, snotty nosed entrepreneur that had a brand new podcast, and he said, "Heck yeah, I'll be on your podcast."
Jeez.
And I emailed him again, and he said, a few weeks ago, and said, "Yeah, man, I'll be on your podcast again. It's been a while. Let's do it. Can you do it Tuesday?" And I've just been blessed with, with stepping through doors and taking action, and learning from a lot of mistakes along the way. And it's got me to this place now where I'm an author, speaker, do a conference called The Thing, and really just want to help people who have great. The Thing was really born out of like this idea that I had a lot of friends that I had two groups of friends. I had one group of friends that wanted to do something with their life but didn't know anything about doing it. And then I had this other group of friends that were kind of the world's best secret. They had a brilliant talent, they were great communicators, but nobody knew who they were. And I thought, man, if we could fix that for both of those people, we could probably make a difference. And we've
Oof,
been doing
yeah.
that a while. I'm not sure we've totally fixed that, but we've definitely made a difference. And we've created an amazing community in the process, and we're not done yet. And so now I speak and write and um, go do some corporate training from time to time. So I have an interesting perspective because, for The Thing, we've had over 100 speakers that have been a part of it, and I've spoke for organizations big and small, all over the country and a few around the world.
Wow. Wow. Well, I mean, I just wrote down about 10 questions from, you know,
Oh Lord,
listening to that. But, let's back up for a second. So, what advice would you
let's see if we can
give?
make this a two-parter for you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It might need to be. What advice would you give to, that person who's thinking, okay, I crush my presentations, I've been asked to do a couple of these, more special breakouts at our company's conferences. I think I might have something to offer and I want to start going down this road to, become a speaker. And, what kind of early advice would you give them as they want to
Man,
start
ask
moving?
ask the big simple three-letter questions. And our first question would be who, who do I want to who do I want to help?
Mm,
And then before you ask how or why, how or all the details, I want you to ask why. Why do you want to help them?
yeah.
Why do you want to be the one, and why should they care?
Yeah.
Why should they care that you're coming? And um, this is not it's one of the speaking is one of the most difficult things that you will ever do, and yet in a lot of ways it's very easy.
Mm,
Um, and the more that you can, it's like we got a group of entrepreneurs yesterday today in my town here, and we do this thing every year around the holidays called $100 tip lunch. And everybody that comes brings a $100 bill and gives it to one of the main guys, and we tip our servers, and we tipped two servers that we had almost $2,000 yesterday.
Wow.
Um, and rocked their Christmas, right? Their kids
Right.
weren't going to get to have Christmas without it, kind of thing. And it happens every year. It's the same narrative. It's amazing, but it's a reminder of like, what we could do together. And I think that's one of the things that you have to ask yourself is like, what are the things that you need? Who do you need to help you get there?
Yeah.
What 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 is it that you're really trying to do by being a communicator? What is it that you want to do with your what is that message or that thing that you really think that you possess? Um, and the first thing that you've got to do, man, is just go and get some at bats.
Yes.
The one thing that I was blessed to get through all of those years is people like, man, speaking is so easy for you because I'll sit down with people all the time and I'll write them a talk in 5 or 10 minutes
Yeah.
because I'll do I can alliterate. I've got this shovel. I could do a talk on the shovel that didn't like it was a challenge, right? Just because it's funny. This is actually a shovel that we gave away at the thing 2022 about leaders that bury their genius, and so we keep this, and I give
Oof.
everybody a shovel. I like things like this. I like objects. I want people to put this stuff on their desk and remember. And mine literally stays on my desk because my desk is a mess, and it's proven that geniuses have messy desks, and I'm the proof of it. Right? And but yeah, man, if you're starting, it is it's a difficult thing to do. Um, but it's also if you could go out and just say yes a lot, like
Yeah.
anywhere that you can go and speak, and we live in a world where you're carrying more of a TV production studio than when Jason and I were kids, what the TV stations had.
Yep.
Turn that joker on and start talking to people, start getting some at bats, start podcasting, start live streaming, start talking to people, start working that muscle out. And through the years I had the chance, to do that thousands and thousands of times.
Mm.
There were times in a week at camp I would do 20 talks. Um, which is much, much different than people who do one keynote, right?
Right.
You do one keynote and you go and repeat that one keynote everywhere you go. It's like people are like, yeah, you should have one keynote. I'm like, man, I'd be so bored if I did one keynote. I used to have to go to a youth camp and do at least 10
Yep.
because they'd want you in the morning and the evening.
Yep.
Um, and so, and you have to have a very different process for kind of loading the talk in your mind if you've got 10 other ones coming behind it.
Absolutely.
It's a much different people that understand that process. It's a very unique skill. But you learn a lot by going out there and doing that. I mean, granted, dude, I mean, I started doing this in 19 really speaking in like kids church in early 1990s, 1990 probably.
Mm.
And so, the first time I got paid for speaking was in 93, 94. So like, you know, I've been doing this for 30 years now. And
Wow.
that makes me feel really, really old. Um, but I've learned a lot, and I've learned how to like evolve and shift and change.
Yep.
Obviously, when I first started, like there was no PowerPoint or keynotes that you were use. You weren't using slides, um, and so I shifted my whole way that I'm putting my notes on my screen for myself now. Like when I teach in a corporation, like I don't have notes; they're all into my slide presentation.
Yep.
Um, all of my cues are in there. Versus 20 years ago, my keys would have all been on the back of a index card, some post-it notes on some scripture references.
Yep.
When I
Yep.
was speaking at churches, and so um, you sort of adapt to what the current situation is, and man, once you really know like what it is you really care about talking about,
Yep.
and then like why you really want to do that, what the core. I love C3PO and Star Wars. Like, what's your binary motivator, man? What is that programming that like says like what do I really have? What is that thing that's just burning deep in me that I can't not talk about? Now, Seth Godin and I actually had a conversation about that on my most recent episode of my podcast at the time we're recording this. And he's like, man, I don't know that I'd do that professionally. And I I don't know of any other option, man, to do things I don't love and care deeply about. I don't work with anybody that I don't want to work with.
Mm.
Um, And and the older you get, man, the more you start putting those boundaries up.
Yep.
The more
Yep.
you start saying, like, I'm not going to work with people I'm not going to work people who steal my peace.
Ooh, ooh, yes.
I'm not going to work with people who, you start, and you knew exactly who I was talking about. You could share stories that would have people never call you again, with that sentence, right? Like I felt that one hit you, dude. And I think you start to realize the more that you do this, the more at bats, you learn, like, where the places and the things that you're not going to do, and the things that you know air a big change in the last 2 years has been air travel. You know, I used to fly in, speak, and leave. That option, the world doesn't. You can't do that anymore.
Mm.
You've got to get in the day before, because you just never know.
Mhm.
I see guys all the time. There's a guy that does, um, Scott Erickson is a guy that I know that does speaking and painting, and he's always flying in the morning of. And I'm like, dude, you are a brave son of a gun. My stress level can't handle same day flights.
Yes.
I got to get in the night before, relax. I love seeing the city too. It helps me kind of acclimate to, like, I like to get in and kind of get positioned and relaxed.
Yep.
My wife has been super supportive of that. She's like, no, you need to stop with the getting there at the last minute and coming home right away. You're not any good. You're not any good when you get home, anyways. When you come home and you're wiped out, like,
Mm.
be fully present there, and then come
Yep.
home and be fully present when you get home.
That's good.
Uh,
That's really good. Go back. Let's go back for a second. So you talked about platform. I can remember, I followed Michael Hyatt. I read every blog post, and then platform came out, and everyone's like, "Oh, we're going to take our blog to the next level." And there's this philosophy out there. I hear it all the time because speakers email me each week, and they're like, "I want to speak. I want to speak. I see you're speaking. How do you speak?" And there's kind of this thought process I think some speakers have that it's like it kind of goes like this: the phone's going to ring, the emails are going to come in, and what they don't see is it actually takes a whole lot of effort on the other side. Building a platform, like you talked about those questions in the beginning, honing your content, knowing your audience, and then actually reaching out to people and seeing if they will, if they want you, and then we could talk about this later in the conversation. But then dealing with the, no thank yous or unsubscribe me or the I got a really negative review on my podcast last week. I probably shouldn't talk about it out loud, but
no, talk about it out loud.
I love it. They
Let's
you know
talk. Let's talk to Karen for a minute. I love when people give a negative review at a podcast,
I know.
because it's like, dude, do you know? Do you know that you can literally just hit the unsubscribe button and never know that I exist again? Like,
Yep.
so it's interesting. Is that the field? You're blocking most of it. Is that the poster for Field of Dreams behind you on the floor of your
It
office?
is. Yes. Yes.
That's interesting. We kind of all look at business like that, right? Like, we look at, like, oh man, if I build it, they will come. You know,
Yep.
and what's funny is one of the things that people talk a lot about right now, and you're gonna hear it and go, yep, is consistency. Man, if you were just consistent, you get out and you put the
Mm.
content out. But if you're consistently putting out garbage, nobody's gonna care, right? Um, just like apparently someone thought about your podcast, right?
Yes.
It's one of my favorite principles in life is that you're just one relationship away
Mm.
from a different life.
Yep.
And if you're willing to slow down enough in life and in business to just be with people and get to know, I love the name of your brand, dude, to speak with people. If you're able to just kind of, like, get off your high horse, um, you know, one of my struggles with that book and the big concept, I'm gonna get hate mail. Um, is, platforms are for pulling people up on them. They're
Mm.
not standing on. And if you're not pulling other people up on your platform, you don't need one. You don't
Right.
deserve one. If you're not using it as a place to, like, bring attention to other people, and man, I hope you saw that at our event. The good majority of the people that come to speak at the thing, had no idea they would ever be a speaker. It's funny because we talk about her, but Liz Wilcox, came to the thing 2019, timid, sat in the back row, was freezing the whole time because we kept the. She was in an American flag sweater. Had a massive, like, fear of public speaking. And emailed me when I asked for did call for speakers for 2020. Well, obviously 2020, we all know what happened then. But I was one of the guys that I still did my event in 2020. We delayed it from May to November because our event used to be in May in Orlando. We moved it to a house in Reunion, Florida. We had like a 20-bedroom house
Mm.
that we did the event at, and Liz came to speak, and we had a movie theater in that house. The movie theater in this house sat 40 people, if that gives you an indication of how big this house was. But we got a great deal on it because it was the pandemic, right? And Liz got on that stage literally, and you could see the sweat rolling
Mm.
from every Liz had, right? Like, and and now, like, she's got, you know, over a $500,000 business, has spoken on hundreds of stages and
Mm.
podcasts and platforms. And that, I'm not at all taking credit for her success, because what made her successful is she had the boldness to show up, to pick
Mm.
herself in the room, and then to ask and to grow and to do the work and to build the relationships. And she says yes a lot.
Mm.
Um, and I think ego is the number one thing, and pride, that will actually keep you from being successful in this space.
Oof.
If you think that you're all that, and it's so funny you mentioned the big deal people that are on my podcast, and I'll be honest with you, man, they've been the easiest people for me to get. The people who think they're a big deal, um, even the people that I would consider to be a friend, they're the ones that'll give you the grief and be like, well, I gotta, it's just like, and there are people that I've mentioned and you mentioned that couldn't buy to be on my show if they tried to get on my show. They could
Mm.
give me a. There's one person in particular that could literally show up and say, "I'll pay $1 million to be on your podcast," and I would say, "Keep your money.
Mm.
I'm not giving you my platform." Um, and but that person telling me no after they had told me yes was actually how I ended up with Seth Godin on my podcast the first
Huh.
time, because I was mad. I was ticked off. I almost did one of those blogs where I was just like, "Arr!" But when they said no, I went and asked someone else, and Seth emailed me back and said, "Hey, man, I'm in Africa. Um, but I get back and I can do Tuesday. Can you do Tuesday?" Well, of course, I was slammed on Tuesday. But everybody that was on Tuesday was happy to reschedule with me when I gave them the opportunity to, because I was like, "Hey, man, I've got Seth Godin coming on the podcast, and you and I are going to have to meet tomorrow, or the next time you have available, but it's not going to be today." Um, and I think that the thing that is going to stop most people is just this. We sort of feel like, the fake it till you make it
Mm.
philosophy that we've been taught.
Yep.
And I think what's keeping a lot of people from succeeding is the people that you're most equipped to actually help would actually be better, would be knocking at your door if you were just being real about where you were
Oof.
and sharing your honest struggles and your honest, um, the things that are keeping you from succeeding and winning. Um, and if more people would just be honest, because what they always say, it's like, well, who should I help? How do I know who I should serve? And honestly, the person that you're most equipped to help and serve is you 3, 6, 12 months ago.
Mm.
Not, you don't need to be this big crazy expert that knows, you know, astrophysics. You know,
Right.
you need to be somebody that knows something and struggled with something and shares, um, their real struggle. And the
So
best way that
good.
I know to share, to really help your people, and I know a lot of your audience is probably faith based, but imagine hearing somebody get up at church and say they're going to do a message on prayer, and they get on stage, and the first guy gets up and says, "Hey, I'm going to share about prayer and about how just I am one of the best. I have one of the best prayer lives in the world, and I want to share with you 10 principles that I've learned from being super close to God." Or the person that gets on stage and says, "Man, I really struggle with prayer.
Mm.
I really struggle with quieting my life down enough to just admit that I need the help of God." And together we're going to dive into scripture. We're going to dive into some of my struggles. And I hope that I can share through my struggle how you can learn to get through this. Which one of those people are you going to lean into? and listen to and glean a lot from. But everyone tries to be that first person.
Yep.
They think that is the path to success. And that's the path to being a word that would just ended up being covered up with a beep on your podcast, right? Like that's what that path is.
Absolutely.
I think that's one of the struggles of the American church is, you know, I have a lot of friends that have been chewed up and spit out by the church, great communicators, pastors that have failed, done stupid stuff. And you know, there's a guy in Birmingham, Alabama, Chris Hodges, that I look up to a ton, because Chris just has a staff full of guys that are misfits and broken, jacked up people.
Mm.
And when everybody else is running from these people, Chris is running to them and hiring them and saying, "Man, come here and heal and get restored and rebuilt."
Yep.
And you know, and I think that those are the kind of people I want around in my life.
Yeah.
I want to be around those people, and I want to be the kind of person that lives that kind of life, man. I want to be the kind of person that's serving and available to people. And you know, Gary Vaynerchuk talks a lot about the 51-49 principle, and that he wants to be the one that delivers more value in every relationship that he's in. And you know, if you look at all of our heroes in this space, man, Maxwell, all the way back to guys like Zig Ziglar, and you know, there's a list of people.
Oh yeah.
And every one of them would almost always say the thing that you do is you deliver the most value in the room and you'll win. And if we could just learn to be people who just show up places and deliver value, and not necessarily deliver value to think that you might get something out of return out of that, but just because that's the kind of person that you are, that you're going to show up, be good, and deliver that, whatever that thing that you have to bring to the table is. And if you show up as a speaker and as a podcast guest and as a person who just shows up like Santa with a bag of goods on their back and always just generous and leave the room better than you found it, man, you're going to have no trouble building a speaking career.
That's so powerful. So powerful. Absolutely. Yeah, because people kind of have these, you know, well, I'm going to be a speaker, and then I'll walk into the room and everybody will clap, and then I'll leave. And, you know, it's this, but what you just hit on is just the most important part of it. Like, we can't lose sight of delivering value and being there for people, and, you know, and being, you know, I can remember years ago, you know, I was at a conference. It was actually 1990, I want to say 5, Cobo Hall in downtown Detroit. And John Maxwell was putting on one of his early, I mean, those were the days of like the Enjoy Life Club cassette tapes that came in the mail. Yep. Oh, I could not wait for those. And he did this giant, you know, inspiring talk. And I remember him saying, you know, you've just got to always figure out how to make time, you know, for people, and the people who want to learn from you, and the people who used to be you, you know, a year or two ago. And what you're talking about is just so critical. And that's just, I hope, you know, from our listeners and the people listening to this who know me, I hope that they will say, you know, oh yeah, Jason, you do that. You make time for people. You figure things out. I mean, that's what kind of shocked me about you, you know, because I've seen your stuff in the past, and then I got to a place this fall, and you reached out, and, you know, we're like, yeah, you gotta join us. I love that part of it. And a lot of the quote unquote speaking programs out there, you know, I love them all. I've learned so much from them, but they don't teach that part of it. They don't teach the, you know, be extremely generous, deliver more value than you know, like I love those steps, and reminding people, you know, those are the important things to do. Well, friends, this concludes this part of this episode. Because this episode was filled with, we just packed it with such amazing insights and wisdom, we have been able to split it into 2 parts. And so we hope you enjoyed this first part. Get ready for part 2. We're going to air it this Friday, and can't wait for you to experience it. See you then. Well, thank you for joining us on another episode of the Speak with People podcast. We hope that you were encouraged. We hope that you were inspired and challenged to improve your communication skills. I want to thank you again for being a part of the Speak with People podcast community. Make sure you don't miss out on being a part of the Speak with People Facebook community group. Just head to Facebook, type in Speak with People, scroll down, and join our community, because every single day we're encouraging each other, we're helping each other to improve our communication skills. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next episode.